Greetings inside Chasins, everybody. Welcome back. If in the U.S., I hope you had a very nice Thanksgiving and enjoyed my review of Thanksgiving last week. I thought about working in some more titles last week, but I figured most would kind of be out of their normal routine, so I just held off and decided to wait till this week. And a quick coming up is that I'll probably be a bit light in the end of December as well. Just because of those similar reasons. People are going to be out of their usual routine and may not be sitting down to watch YouTube, but I do hope to still work in some holiday-themed films here and there, both horror and not horror. But for this entry, I recently used some of my downtime to kind of revisit some films that I hadn't seen in a while, see how they held up. You know, not that they were forgotten films, just ones that I was wondering how they kind of held up in current times. So for this entry, I wanted to talk about They Live from 1988. It's a film by John Carpenter starring wrestler Roddy Piper, the great Keith David, and the gorgeous Meg Foster. It's based on the short story 8 o'clock in the morning by Ray Nelson, which I read about 25 plus years ago. I remember enjoying it and, seeing that the film was kind of just based on that story, where they kind of took that story and fleshed it out a bit more to make a full feature-length film out of it. But what is this film about? Well, the tagline of sorts simply states, "They influence our decisions without us knowing it. They numb our senses without us feeling it. They control our lives without us realizing it. They live." So this one is often lumped into the horror genre, likely due to Carpenter's involvement, but I've always felt that it's more of a sci-fi thriller in a way. So to boil down the basics of this, Piper's character, Nada, is out of work. He's, in some troubling economic times, so he travels out to California looking for more work. He's able to get some day jobs on like a construction site where he meets Frank, who's played by Keith David, and they're able to scrape by at this homeless encampment. All is pretty much well, but something does seem a bit odd, such as this church being active all throughout the night, including church choir, people kind of coming and going from that church. Some strange transmissions happening on these television sets that are giving people watching it these pretty bad headaches. So he decides to investigate. And eventually he finds these sunglasses which allow the person wearing them to see an unfiltered version of the world. So looking black and white, he sees that most of our world is some sort of a subliminal advertisement and influence of sorts. Billboards and magazines and even money all have something to entice us to basically just stay asleep, in a manner of speaking. Just go by day, move along, question nothing. But why is this the way that the world is? Well, he starts to figure that out as he sees a person unfiltered. Now, not everybody, but some, typically the wealthy, are these strange alien creatures who are reaping the benefits of this society that's been built. So now it's up to him to convince others of this, to join a resistance group and try to take down the system as best as they can. Watching this one as a grown-up versus being a teenager when I first saw it on cable is definitely a bit weird. So much of it is kind of echoed every few decades as various countries or parts of countries experience an economic downturn or societal downturn, with the rich getting richer, the poor getting poorer, the middle class kind of being squeezed out of all of that. We've seen it in cycles, here and there from one administration to another. We see this kind of repeating itself. It's even mentioned in the film that this seems to happen at the end of every 100 years or so. But what particularly stood out to me this time around was a conversation that Keith David's character was having, where he spoke of the race, the game, saying this is life, this is what you need to do to survive, but wait, I'm going to be there trying not only to get that for myself, but to keep you from getting it to ensure that I survive. And there's another by a character who was one of the downtrodden in the film, who was kind of recruited by these aliens, about how everybody sells out eventually, so why not be on the winning team for once? Because in this framework that these aliens have built, you can indeed thrive if you kind of sign up to be a part of it. So you will be fine, your life will be fine. Future generations, don't know. The planet in general, got me. So the more greedy and selfish you are, the better you will make out in this situation. And this seems to echo some of the criticisms of capitalism, especially the excess of ultra-capitalism that we used to kind of poke fun of and hold up a mirror to back in the 80s, but has been creeping back in during these times, that the bottom line always needs to be more profitable each quarter to the next, even if the livelihood of those who enable that, prosperity in the first place, which in this case, of course, is the blue-collar worker. So David's character even mentions this hardship that he had in Detroit, where these auto companies were all bailed out. But instead of enabling the workforce, they still did the layoffs and gave themselves big bonuses. if any of that sounds familiar to certain things happening with the banking industry back in around 2008 or so. So outside of like, the message within this, a quick touch on the film itself from a more basic standpoint. First off, this is Carpenter through and through. It's definitely got his style, his pacing, and of course that soundtrack, that thumping kind of haunting bass line in the background. Also, this one's not very FX heavy. Having come out in the late 80s, of course, it's all, practical effects, but what Carpenter does is he uses black and white remarkably well in that for everything in color, you're seeing, what we see as the real world. It looks more enticing to the viewer versus the black and white where you see what's really happening underneath it all. So it puts you in the seat of not wanting to see what's actually happening beneath all of it. Just stay in the rose-colored, highly colored world and go back to sleep, if any of that even makes any sense. But also, Piper does a surprisingly good job with this role, and not just in the action scenes. He portrays a working class nobody or anybody, nada, perfectly. And I credit this to his wrestling career, because say what you want about pro wrestling, at its core, it is a scripted stunt show. So they need to sell the stunts just as much as they need to sell their characters to really put on a great performance, and he brought a lot of that to the screen. Also stick around to the end because you'll see a quick clip of me from another channel where I actually got to meet Piper at a con, and he was speaking about one of his lines about coming here to chew bubblegum and kick ass, and I gave that man some bubblegum, just keep him under control. But speaking of which, this also has one of the best fight scenes that I've ever seen. It's roughly 6 or 8 minutes long, I think, and they even did a parody of it on South Park, like years afterward, of course. And it really made me feel for these characters. Even that sellout character signing up with these aliens has me understanding their point of view, even if I disagree with it. So, does They Live actually hold up after 35 years? Well, absolutely it does, and it's absolutely worth checking out. And speaking of checking out, thanks for checking out my latest little video here for They Live from 1988, which at the time, I had actually picked it up for pretty cheap on Blu-ray at Viper Video here in Tampa. I'll put a link to their site in the description. But it's also, at this time of this video, available on Stars and a lot of different paid services and everything. But that's about all that I have for this entry. But what about you? Sound off in the comments. Particularly if you've seen this one back in the day and then revisited it more recently than back when it was on like high rotation on cable. Did your thoughts about this film change over time? Do you see it with a different light as you've gotten older and so forth? Or just what are your thoughts in general? Anyways, thanks for coming by, and I'll see you in the next one.
Stupid ass line.